Melee's highly technical execution made the game too difficult for casual play, and he worked to make the sequel much more simple and accessible for new players. While Brawl succeeded as a casual game, it suffered competitively. Many of Melee's top players tried to give Brawl a chance. 1 year after his final Melee victory, Ken would return to the finals of EVO playing Brawl, where he would be promptly beaten by a 14-year-old kid. The player who beat him had no prior tournament experience, and he only entered because his family just happened to be vacationing near the venue at the time. The tournament result was viewed as a total farce by the competitive Smash community. The fact that essentially a random player could score a fluke win against a skilled veteran like Ken served as an indictment against Brawl as a competitive game. With all this considered, it didn't take long before many of Melee's competitors soured on the new Smash game. For the first time ever, the Smash community was divided over the future of the franchise. In an era before esports were commonplace in online culture, many fans struggled to accept Smash Bros. As anything beyond its original role as a party game. Most were prepared to write off Melee as a stale, dead game with nothing left to figure out, and the vast majority of players were ready to move on with the series. Only a small ragtag community would stay behind in what they considered to be the better game, and luckily for them, this 7-year-old title was still very much alive.
Right now we are in the Atlanta airport, and it's like 7:30 in the morning. It's cold. I'm wearing a jacket, so it's not Florida.
Hungrybox started entering local Melee tournaments in the summer of 2007. In just a few months, he started regularly placing in the top 5, and by the next year, he started winning. As HBox kept playing, he found himself conquering tougher and tougher competition. In 2009, he entered Revival of Melee, the game's first major tournament since the release of Brawl. Facing off against the best in the nation, Hungrybox placed 7th. 4 months later at Genesis, he placed 3rd. 2 months after that at Tip-Top 5, he won. Just 2 years after he started competing, Hungrybox was already contending for the title of Best in the World. But in addition to his individual success, HBox was arguably taking part in something much more important. The rise of Hungrybox was indicative of a new generation of Melee. By 2010, the old legends of yesteryear had pretty much vanished. Like most of the old community, they had moved on to new frontiers. The departure of Melee's old generation left new top players the opportunity to usher in a new era. In January 2010, the Pound 4 tournament would mark the beginning of a period in Melee's history known as the Era of the Five Gods, specifically serving as the first tournament with all 5 gods in attendance. The story of Melee's gods begins with the first god, Mewtwo King. Beginning in 2005, Mewtwo King would eventually rise and defeat Melee's old legends. Mewtwo King's Melee ascent was due almost entirely to his pioneering research into the game's combat. Frame data, character matchups, KO percentages, information that's readily accessible today was originally discovered by Mewtwo King's exhaustive exploration of Melee's mechanics. And for many years, no player knew more about the game than Mewtwo King. In 2008, Mewtwo King was widely regarded as the top player in both Melee and Brawl. To this day, he remains the only player to achieve the concurrent title of Best in the World in 2 different Smash games. And as impressive as this accomplishment was, it meant that Mewtwo King's attention was divided among 2 very different games, leaving the door open for many to challenge his throne. The second of Melee's gods to rise to power would be Mango, who, by 2009, would overtake Mewtwo King as the top Melee player. Throughout the history of Melee, many would argue that no player had a more intuitive understanding of the game than Mango. Watching Mango perform at his highest level is an experience unlike anything else in Melee. The way he could effortlessly string together complex combos led to a style that was as fluid as it was unstoppable. At times, the only thing that could stop him was how much he was willing to try. Mango's exciting and aggressive playstyle made him a consummate fan favorite, especially through his iconic clashes with Melee's third god, Armada. As Europe's best player, Armada carried the weight of a whole continent on his shoulders as he traveled to prove himself in the United States. Historically, Melee's competitive scene has viewed Europe as a significantly weaker region than North America, a stigma that was often used by Americans to invalidate the success of European players. Armada would defy everyone's expectations by immediately contending with America's best. His unrivaled dedication and consistency would make him one of the most formidable opponents Melee had ever seen. Hungrybox established himself as Melee's fourth god through his meteoric rise in 2009, and last but not least, Melee's new generation would be cemented through the rise of the fifth god, Dr. PP. Although he was the last to develop, PPMD would quickly rise to the highest level of competition. PP's style relied on tactical execution to pick apart his opponents with surgical precision. When the Doctor was in, you were about to be prescribed your daily dose of destruction. These are Melee's 5 gods. Now that we've introduced who they are, we can talk about what they are. Carrying the title of God in any game entails a great deal of prestige, and Smash Bros is no exception. So what exactly did these 5 players do to transcend us lowly mortals? It's unknown who exactly introduced the term 5 gods to describe Melee's top players, but the expression started seeing frequent use in the summer of 2014, most likely used to describe the era of supreme dominance that preceded it. From 2009 to 2015, a member of the 5 gods would win every major tournament, utterly dismantling the rest of the competition in the process. In any competitive sport or game, it's typical to have 1 or 2 elite players win a lion's share of the competitions. Chess, for example, has witnessed Magnus Carlsen dominate the competition for the past 6 years. A rarer case is currently on display in tennis, which has seen 3 players dominate major tournaments over the past decade. A competitive game with 5 elite players occupying the same era is almost unheard of, but if such an unlikely event were to occur, it's somewhat fitting that it would happen in a game used to defying expectations. As the legend goes, Melee's 5 gods would hardly ever lose to any other players, and all were capable of defeating each other in any given competition. But just how much better were the gods than everyone else? Well, as a reminder, I like to recall 2 cases involving the player Hax, a skilled competitor known for his flashy combos and lightning-quick execution. In 2013, Hax was ranked as the number 6 player in the world, the best of the non-gods. He would remain a perennial top 10 player until his hiatus in 2015. In a 2014 tournament, Hax faced off in a set against PPMD. In the first game, he got 3-stocked in about 2.5 minutes. In the second game, he got 4-stocked in 68 seconds. Later that year, Hax would compete in a set against Mango, which Mango would win 3-1. Not the most impressive result, until you realize that Mango doesn't actually main Marth or Captain Falcon. That's just the difference between a good player and a god. Even when you're good, you're a long way from the best.
Oh. Yo, did he just walk up slowly and down smash?
At one point, the gods were so far above the rest of the competition that they could even win with their secondary characters. Now would probably be a good time to talk about Melee's characters. Out of all the Smash games, Melee may have the most interesting character composition. Some Smash games have 1 or 2 characters that outright dominate the meta, with the most obvious example being Brawl's aptly named Meta Knight, a character so blatantly overpowered that some tournaments chose to ban him entirely. On the other hand, the best Melee character has always been kinda tough to figure out. To put it simply, about a third of Melee's roster are completely unusable in a competitive setting, another third are just kinda bad, and the last third are all capable of winning tournaments. To this day, the community remains largely undecided on which character is actually the best, a debate that can be traced all the way back to the beginning of the game through the history of Melee's tier lists. That's right, this widespread facet of modern internet discourse originated from the niche purpose of categorizing characters in fighting games. In the early days of Melee, Sheik was considered the best character with her rapid attacks and movement. As the meta progressed through the rest of the 2000s, more characters would emerge as top-tier contenders. Peach with her strong aerial attacks, Marth with his chain grabs and huge spacing, Captain Falcon with his heavy combos, the Ice Climbers with their infinite combo, and the space animals Fox and Falco with their great mobility and high damage. And then there's Puff. In any competitive